Welcome to Global Perspectives. What is the mystery of laughter, and what is the role of laughter in mystery novels? For answers, we turn to award-winning political cartoonist Dana Summers.
Global Perspectives with Pulitzer Prize-winning commentator John Bercia.
Welcome to the show, Dana.
Thanks. Happy to be here, John.
Let's talk about how you became an award-winning political cartoonist. First, what led you there? Was it something you always wanted to do, or was it something that you sort of worked your way into?
I actually did it out of necessity, I guess you could say. Originally, I wanted to do comic strips. That was my goal in life, was to do a comic strip. But at the time, it was extremely difficult to break into the profession. They took like maybe 1 out of 2,000 submissions to different syndicates. They were really hard to get into it. And Watergate happened to happen, and I realized that editorial cartooning was getting a ton of recognition, and some of them were just hilarious. And I sort of gravitated towards that, and never went back. I used that to get a foot in the door, and then years later, the comic strips finally did come. But it's funny how comic strips were my original idea, but the editorial cartooning was kind of, I guess, like the back door to this profession. Actually became my main profession, and worked at 3 different dailies. And
So the idea of the mystery of laughter, obviously comics are meant to be funny. Political cartoons can be funny, but they can be very, very serious as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you manage all of that? How do you ensure that you're dealing with a topic in a way that is sensitive if it's serious, but also potentially funny? And that whole mystery of laughter thing. Laughter is such a strange phenomenon because a lot of times if someone else is laughing, you'll start laughing too. You don't even know what it's about, but it's funny that the person is laughing.
It's totally subjective. Something that I think is hilarious, someone else might look at it and say, I don't get this, what's so funny? You know, a friend of mine was saying that just the other day that he has some people who he hangs out with who have tried to watch Seinfeld and just don't get it. They just don't think it's funny, which to me, what's not funny about that show? I think it's all subjective. So, and especially in the comic strips, I do what I think is funny. I do what would make me laugh if I were reading a comic strip, and then I just put it out there in hope that someone else thinks it's funny. As far as the editorial cartoons go, you're right. You take a serious topic. To get a serious point across, sometimes you can use some pretty dark humor to do it. Sometimes you can do a light humor and still get a serious point across. I guess that's the trick you've got to learn. It's a bit of a tightrope walk there, you know, because if you make something really funny and it's a super serious issue, you're going to get a blowback from people thinking that what's so funny about this? And then there are those issues that just are not funny, and you don't treat them as funny. You don't even try to inject humor into them. But there are those issues that just lend themselves to. Sometimes politics can be so ridiculous that the only thing you can do is laugh at it.
Well, I have 2 cartoons of yours in my office that I've had for years and years, and one of them is about a very serious subject, and I think it had to do with one of the space shuttles that had a tragic accident, and that was obviously done in a very, very somber way. And then the other one, which you may or may not remember, was inspired by a conversation we were having on Kurds, which at the time, this was years ago, no one was thinking about Kurds, and you had me talking about the Kurds, and apples and peanuts and shoes were flying from the side. So that was a serious issue that became funny, but how prophetic that was in terms of the prominence of Kurdish issues now. People weren't aware then. We were way ahead of our time in thinking about that. And I look at that every day, and it's hysterical.
I kind of shy away from issues that aren't really well known. I'm immersed in this, and so are you, I'm sure, in political issues. And so every day I know a lot of things that maybe the everyday person going to work, getting the kids ready for school, doing this, they get snippets of it in the news. They may not get into the weeds as much as we do. And so I try to keep the cartoons on issues that are out there front and center as much as I can, so that even people who are catching, little bits and pieces of the news on the radio or whatever in their car would still get what I'm trying to say. That's what I try to do, and it's hard to do with a caption, and hopefully it's a one-line caption and a one-shot illustration of some sort, and hopefully you hit the target. Sometimes you don't.
What would you say is, for you, the most memorable editorial cartoon that you ever did?
Well, I guess only because of the reaction that it got, the Challenger cartoon, because people just had a visceral reaction to it. The Sentinel printed up thousands of copies, and they gave them out free, and there was a line around the building to get them. We were invited Ralph Dunnigan and I were invited to the Space Center to get a tour before anybody was allowed in the VAB building. We got in there. It was exciting. But I think that reaction, I would have to say that one. Others, someone asked me this question the other day, and there's another one that pops into my mind. I think I had Gorbachev and Reagan. They were sitting at a table that was actually the nuclear button was the table. And I had Reagan saying, "Stop pounding so hard on the table." He's talking to Gorbachev. The illustration of it and the concept of it is one that I really liked. It just sort of jumped into my head. I've done a lot that I liked. I've done a lot that I don't. I've done a lot that I saw in the paper and went, I've missed it on that one, or the drawing could have been way better, or why didn't I word this differently?
I think people have probably picked up that even though you're creating art, you're also doing writing, whether it's captions or comments that characters are making in cartoon strips and things like that. So there is a writing component, and you were involved with the editorial board of a major newspaper for a long time, and as a result, you were in multiple conversations helping to flesh out issues and perspectives and things like that, and reading the results. So the writing was always part of the mix. And so I guess it's not entirely a surprise that you would have picked up your pen or your computer or whatever you use and turned to actually writing something exclusively. And so I want to kind of segue into that, because I just find it fascinating that you've spent your life as a cartoonist, as a political cartoonist, as an editorial cartoonist, and now you're writing mystery novels. So tell us how that happened. That to me is just a fascinating development.
Well, I've always been interested in suspense novels ever since I was young, since a teenager. I got into the James Bond novels, and I thought, boy, this is pretty cool to read a story and just become immersed in it. And how much fun would it be to write one? And then 30 years later, I finally got around to trying it. But the problem with the approach I took was I thought after reading so many, I thought, well, I can do this. And so you try writing it without any kind of instruction at all in it, and you find out pretty quickly that there's a lot of moving parts to writing a novel. Plot, you've got the pacing, and you've got character development, and you've got to be able to write paragraphs that end in power words, and every scene has to push the story forward. There's so many things you have to remember. So I took workshops and went to conferences and really spent a lot of time reading about how to do it first. The first one I did went in the drawer, I guess, which is what happens to a lot of first novels. This one that I've finished this time is called Drawn and Buried. It's up on Amazon now. It was in the works for probably 2.5 years or so, because I was doing my full-time job, which includes 14 comic strips and 4 editorial cartoons every week, which is a time-consuming deadline load. So in between all that, I was at the computer figuring out how I wanted to put this story together. And it actually came from an incident that happened to me when I worked in Dayton. I had a credible death threat, and the cops tapped my phone. They watched my kids at school, and then it was a credible threat. So this job opened up for me at the Sentinel here in Florida, and I escaped to here in time. But it turned out the guy was pretty serious because he latched onto a columnist who was working for the Daily News up there, and actually shot the windows out of his car when he was driving to work one day. So anyway, this incident sort of germinated in the back of my head. People say, you got to write what you know. Don't try to write anything that you don't know anything about. So I thought, well, how can I put together a story that involves a cartoonist? And I used that incident as the impetus to kick off a story that it's really not like what happened to me, but that was the whole thing that kind of helped me to get this started.
Well, I was going to ask you how much of real life experiences went into this work and other works, and I think you just explained it. A lot of times you draw inspiration from life, and life is so crazy, especially in this day and age, that you don't have to make up that much. You can just replicate what's
right.
going on out in the real world.
That's right. And having worked at 3 different daily newspapers and plus a weekly, I've dealt with a lot of different editors, a lot of different editorial board meetings. Each newspaper had a different pecking order for their editors, and there were some different different ways that each paper operated. But I used all of that background over the past 40 years to hopefully create a fun story. And this story is, writers or writing instructors will ask you, well, what's the voice of this book? What's your voice? Well, it's easy to have a strong voice in a novel if you write it in the first person. At least it's easier. And this one I did in the first person. The cartoonist is doing most of the talking in this book. He's kind of a wise guy type guy. He's got a past. He won a Pulitzer years before, but the series of cartoons he drew got him a Pulitzer, but it caused the presidential candidate to put a bullet in his head. So this affects him. He leaves the profession, comes back later, and now he's starting over at a smaller paper. Guess where? In Orlando. And so it goes from there. Local politicians begin turning up dead. And the murder scenes are staged to resemble cartoons that he's drawn concerning these politicians. So we know somebody's out there taunting him. And so the question becomes, well, the answer to it all is pretty easy. Just stop drawing. The guy is obviously playing off of this cartoonist's drawings. But all of a sudden, the newspaper is making money because he's got national recognition. The readers want to know what he's going to draw and who's going to get killed. And I mean, it's sort of a black humor approach to this. But the paper's finally making money. The websites are getting more clicks. And the editors are reluctant to fire him, yet he's refusing to do anymore. And there's a lot of tension on how they're handling this. And the news media is parked in his front lawn. Everybody wants to know what's going on. So he's back in the news again, and he really doesn't want to be. But he's got this sarcastic attitude. He always gets himself in trouble. But he knows that he has this, and he just still can't help himself. He's got a big mouth. There's one scene where he's talking to his father, and in high school he decides he's going to start running for exercise, but he doesn't want to be on the track team. He's already gotten thrown off the football team and the basketball team for mouthing off, and so he tells his father that he's just going to run for exercise, and the father says to him, "What? No coach? Who are you going to tell off?" Because this is the kind of attitude that he's got. And so the story sort of takes him through the arc of how he hopefully gets over that while he's dealing with a crazy person who's really dangerous.
So we have a sense of the time it took you to write this, about 2.5 years, but that was, as you said, very much a part-time effort. And I gather, again, from your description that there's some humor in this. I think that's probably important. I'd like you to comment on that. And then, of course, somebody dies. And this seems to be almost a requirement of mystery novels, you know, that somebody dies. You're creating all of these imaginary characters, and, you know, the reader actually grows to empathize with some, even love some of them, and then you kill them. And is that a requirement of the mystery novel, or just it's understood that that has to happen?
Well, I guess there are those mystery novels that probably focus more on, say, treasure hunting. Clive Cussler writes a lot of books where people are looking for treasure or that sort of thing. But they still have there's got to be danger involved in a suspense novel, or it's not a suspense novel, it's something else. Maybe a romantic novel or something. So the way I look at it is, yeah, anything I'm going to write that's suspenseful, somebody's going to get killed in it. You know, and it's best to introduce a character and let the reader know a little bit about them before you knock them off. If you open the story with a body, and nobody's going to care who the body is if they don't know. If they don't know this person, then they're not going to have as much invested in the story, I think. So yeah, I think in this genre, I think you do have to have some violence. And
do you ever have fun and introduce characters who are similar to people you've known in life who have plagued you, and then you kill them off? Or is that too much to divulge?
Well, what I do is take composites of people that I've known over the years, the type of person that, I don't know, I remember so-and-so used to be like this, and I would maybe, you know, incorporate some of those characteristics into this character. You know, you can't really take someone that you know and use them, and it's so obvious that it's them, and they don't want to be in a book. You can get in some trouble over that. So you have to be kind of careful with that. So I make sure that everybody knows this is just fiction, and if somebody sees themselves in this book, they're mistaken. There's a lot of different composites in here, and when you read it, you'll probably say, I remember that room, or whatever. But I tried not to be too specific about anything. Over the years, I've accumulated a lot of stories and a lot of experiences as you have at the newspaper, and so they all played into the mix of this story.
How close do you get to your characters? Because you're sort of the parent. You're creating these, and then you know that you have to get rid of some of them. Do you ever feel bad, even for a moment, when that happens? Or you just think, oh, this is just part of the job, and you've been good, but time to go?
No, I'm hoping that people would read the story and say, oh, I can't believe that happened. But yeah, as a writer, you pick a character and you think, even if it's a bad guy, you think, oh man, this guy's so bad. You know, I really love writing about using this character because he's so bad. But you know, at the end, he's either going to go to jail or he's going to get killed or whatever. So that's why a lot of these novelists have series of the same detective doing whatever, and sometimes the bad guy gets away at the end and reemerges in the next book. You know. But yeah, I think you can get attached to some characters, good and bad.
Where do you go for inspiration in terms of issues and characters? And I know a lot would come from your daily experience, but you know, you read a lot, you pay attention to a variety of news media. How national, how international do you go with your writing?
With the mystery writing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or do you plan to go in the future? Because I'm assuming this is the first in a whole series that you have planned.
Yeah, but this is the first one that's out. I have another one that's almost finished, and there's an excerpt at the end of this book for that one. I haven't done, and I don't plan to do any sort of international intrigue, you know, that sort of thing. That's another genre. I guess, you know, your characters could travel to another country, and I would use experiences that I, would have if being in different countries that I've been in. But this one takes place in Orlando, and although a bit of it takes place in Denver and out in Northern California, but most of it's here. So I didn't have these characters traveling around too much. kept it pretty close to home.
I was thinking along those lines, but also about characters who might be from other countries, because the United States has been such a melting pot for all of its history, and there are so many individuals who come from different places, and they are part of critical issues of our time, whether those issues are immigration or something else. And I was just wondering if that might work its way into one of these at some point.
It could in the future. In this particular one, there's different ethnic people in this, but nothing that this. I should say that this book, although it deals with politicians who are getting knocked off, the book is neither left or right. You know, people know me as being right of center, but this book is not either. It's not ideological at all. You know, I don't get into politics per se that much in this. It's more the mystery of who the killer is, what's happening to the newspaper, because the backdrop of the whole thing is the newspaper's starting to slide and people are getting laid off. The mood in the newsroom, which I'm very familiar with, having gone through it. So that's more of what I put into this.
I'm curious as to how you view the two main aspects of your professional life and career right now. I was talking to a writer some time back who described his life as riding a horse, and he was also juggling two different things. And he said, when I take the ride every day, to my left is my regular work, to my right is writing. Do you ever start tilting more one way or the other? Do you ever think about giving up one and embracing the other as your full-time activity?
Good question. The deadlines that I have right now with the cartoons are pretty brutal. I mentioned how much I draw every week, and it's a pretty big workload. And so, and within that cartooning part of my job, I juggle between editorial cartoons, which are fairly serious, and the comic strips, which are totally not, unserious or not serious. So I have to get in the frame of mind when I'm going to write gags for the strips. I have days where I just do that. I can't think too much about what's going on in the world. This is just, crazy ideas, whatever it is that I can come up with. And most of the stuff just pull out of the air. And then the editorial cartoons, I have to get in the frame of mind for that. This is more serious stuff, what's going on in the world. And we have cable channels going all the time in the house, so I know what's happening in the world. And then, the days that I want to actually do some writing, I have to try to put all that away and immerse myself in the writing, which actually I think does me a lot of good, because when your mind is focused on one thing all the time, I think you can get pretty stale at it. And so in the creative sense, flipping back and forth between these three different things, I think helps keep my approach fresh.
Well, as we wrap up, I'd like to thank you. We appreciate your contributions to the cartooning world and political cartooning in particular. Now we have mystery novels, or suspense novels, as some call them. So thank you very much for joining us today, Dana.
It's been a pleasure.
And thank you. For Global Perspectives, I'm John Bercia. We'll see you next time.